everybody. Welcome to Playbook by Laserforce Loveland. This podcast is a platform for laser tag players to geek out about strategies, stories, and ongoings in the Laserforce scene, and for you to join us as another player at the table. My codename is Mischief, and I'm a player from Loveland, Colorado, who loves to talk about tag. Tonight, I'm joined by OldManThanatos from, I don't know, what's your home site? Where do you want to reign from? Because you have multiple places.
Well, I mean, my original home site was Sacramento, rest in peace. I lived in New Zealand for 4.5 years, so Auckland was my home site for a while. But I'm technically siteless at the moment because I'm living in Portland, Oregon at the moment, and there's not while there are a couple of Force sites that are up here, they're FECs that are not competition driven in any way, shape, or form. So pretty much the only tag I get is, when I fly out to Loveland every so often when we have extended members nights. So,
Right. Or when we host some kind of a big tournament. Well, that is a problem that is facing our community right now, the whole homeless player epidemic. Lots of issues going on, which is a good segue. Just issues in general. Tonight we're going to be talking about mental health in laser tag. What came up for you when I brought up this topic? Suggestion for you, Than?
Well, honestly, it's one of those topics that's really an evergreen thing. I've been pretty open over on the Resupply podcast, not necessarily so much recently, but because it hasn't been as much of a thing recently, but with my own mental health journey and going through therapy and the trials and tribulations that come along with that, and the trying to become a better person, as it were. Try to get a better understanding of my own self, so that I can try to be just try to be a bit better person. I'm not going to say more unpleasant, because that would be a lie. But little more open and in tune with what's actually happening in my head, and not be necessarily so reactive on things.
Yeah, I agree with the term evergreen. This is something that is personalized to each of us depending on what we're dealing with in our lives. Mental health in general is a topic that is increasingly developing more research and prevalence, at least in North America. More and more people are taking care of their mental health and learning about themselves, how their brains work, how it's connected to their bodies, and all that. And in the game of laser tag, it's highly prevalent. It changes the way that people play. It changes the way that people interact with one another. Can often be determining factors on if you make it onto certain teams, or if you're even part of the community, allowed to be part of it or not. And it's, I think, at the root of our play lies us. How are we doing as humans? That greatly determines part of how we play. So in the spirit of helping us become better tag players, I wanted to have a talk with you about mental health as it pertains to laser tag. I'll say off the bat, it's been very, I've greatly enjoyed hearing you talk about your mental health journey, Than. And as we'll go through tonight, I'll spout off many factoids and things, but vulnerability begets vulnerability is one huge thing. That when a person is willing to talk about their struggles, it makes it more appropriate and safer for other people to talk about their struggles as well. So when you've been showing up to tournaments, I've really enjoyed getting to know you. For the work you have done, it's apparent to me that you seem more calm and more compassionate towards other people. As much as you hate them, you at least have a tolerance for fools. And you make the community a better place. Lots of people who have that mental health generally there's a healing factor where they want it for other people as well.
Oh, for sure. And and it's one of those things that with what with the work that I've done, I certainly don't think that I'm anywhere close to a finished product. um, and I think that's something that is, important to put out there. That it's a it's it's a it's a constant uh, journey / work,
Hmm.
and there's not really an end point on it, in terms of like, it's that whole theory of you should always be learning. When you stop learning, like that's when you die, in quotes.
Mm-hmm.
A mental health journey is very much the same. Like, I think I'm at a decent place currently. Do I know for a fact there are still other things that I need to work on? 100%. So I think so, but that shouldn't dissuade anybody from taking the first steps on things. I'm 45. There's a reason why my name is OldManThan. I am old. I didn't start therapy until I was 41. So about 4 years ago. And it was kind of brought on by some life changes that were happening. Basically, I was in the process of getting a divorce, and that kind of prompted me to finally, find a neutral third party to talk with and try to work through some things. And so, taking that first step to do the thing was probably one of the scariest things I've ever done. Because there's an element of, having to admit to yourself that, there are issues that you can't fix yourself, and there's a reality where, the generation that I'm from, and again, 45. I was born in 79, so I fit right into this micro generation of Zennial, kind of between X and Millennial, where kind of my age and older, mental health stuff when I was growing up was very, very stigmatized. If you heard that somebody was going to therapy, through my teens and 20s, I mean, really, it was like, oh, what's wrong with that person that they're going to therapy? You don't go to therapy if you're a guy. You push everything down, and the only acceptable emotional response is anger, which has its own, which is obviously a huge problem. It's kind of like if your only acceptable emotional outlet is to express it on some spectrum of anger, that's going to cause some problems as far as that goes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been an interesting 4 years in terms of working through things, and I've worked with a couple of different therapists in that time. When I moved from Texas to Oregon, I had to stop seeing my original therapist because they weren't licensed for Oregon. So that was a whole thing.
Hmm.
Which actually, I guess, that we should make a small disclaimer that, while one of us on this podcast is a licensed therapist, it's not me, it's Luke. We're not your therapist. So, if you are having, mental challenges, need to speak to somebody, definitely speak to somebody, but it's probably not going to be us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great disclaimer. And thank you for sharing that, man. Even just kind of like knowing where you came from, it's a good reminder that we all come from somewhere. That old stigma was essentially, yeah, if you're seeing a therapist, there's something wrong with you. I'd actually kind of agree with that and twist it on its head. Like, there's something wrong with all of us. We're all flawed. We all bring our own crap to the table, things we've dealt with in the past, character flaws, weaknesses we have, and that's part of being a person, and that's completely okay.
Yep.
I think a big thing that we're going to talk about is, being willing to accept those flaws and accept yourself, love yourself, having those. But to piggyback on your disclaimer, just so people know, I do work as a mental health professional, but I've been in my own therapy as well. So just the disclaimer at the top, if you need help mentally, seek out a therapist. You can find plenty of places that'll give you a free intake. If you need professional help, you should do that. It's also not a bad resource to, do research online. Look at professionals on YouTube who talk about different things that you're struggling with, different symptoms. It's okay to ask for help, but it is a scary step for anybody to admit it. But it's okay. The big expression that I've tried to live by, it's kind of been my banner phrase entering this field, is something that my grandfather used to say: we're all just trying to make it.
Yeah. Well, and with that, like, one of the reasons why, when I was initially, starting my therapy journey, one of the reasons I was making a point of talking about it on the Resupply podcast, like, literally, like, almost every week when we were doing a show, and had, like, a mental health minute, where it's like I'd kind of go over, where I was that week, and how that week's appointment had maybe hit on certain things for me, or whatnot. Part of the reason for doing that, it was a very conscious decision to try to normalize going to therapy within our little corner of the internet, because we do have a platform. It's seen by tens of people weekly, but if within that tens of people, and I mean it's tens of people, it's definitely not hundreds, but if within that, people can start going, oh, that's okay, so this is a normal thing that shouldn't have a stigma associated with it. If people can see that, then it makes it more likely that they'll reach out for help. And I have, over the time I was doing that, I did specifically have people reach out to me saying, hey, you talking about it gave me the courage to reach out to a professional to help, or to get help. So that did feel really good, in terms of like, okay, cool, then the reason that I was talking about it connected and had had some net positive impact. I think also kind of just jumping back to one thing I said earlier, like about neither one of us being your therapist for people that are listening. Having said that, um, if if you are struggling and just needing to kind of reach out to talk to somebody, as a generalized statement, I'm pretty sure that anybody would much rather talk to you,
Mm-hmm.
and talk through some stuff if you're going through a bad moment, rather than having to give a eulogy later.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Mm-hmm.
I realize is a fairly nuclear example, but unfortunately, that has been a a a reality that we've dealt with within the force scene in general and the wider laser tag scene in or the force scene in particular and the wider tag scene in general, that we have had people that that we've lost along the way. And so if it's a case of like people going, oh, I don't want to reach out on messenger or text or whatever because I think I might be bothering somebody. I'd rather you bug me and we have a conversation and maybe help you work through some immediate darkness than to have to deal have to hear very negative news later. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of additional stuff there as well.
Thank you. It's so needed to be said. The same will go for me. You're welcome to reach out to me at this channel, leave comments, reach out to me individually if you know me, and if you don't know me, I would just say that one of the amazing things about the Laserforce community in general is the way that we all seem like a bunch of misfits that fit together. We are bonded. The type of person who tends to play in our scene tends to be a person who is not always fit in. Maybe they have some lovely quirks, fun different interests than the majority of people, and we all come together and we find family together. That's been some of the beauty of it. And we do talk a lot of smack. We do sports shows where we rank people, and there's often competition, and we're going to talk about some of the specifics going into this episode. But look at your local community. Who are the players that love and care about you? And even if you don't feel that they love and care about you, I want to challenge you that maybe you just don't know them well enough yet, or they don't know you well enough yet. I mean, there's no one at my site that I don't care about and that I wouldn't give up my time and attention if they really needed it. Like, I'm not perfect. No one's perfect. We can't guarantee you that if you reach out, like, people are going to be always incredible to you, but the right people are out there. Safe people are in this community that care a lot about you. Like you, the listener, or you, whoever has shown up at our tournament. We fought really hard to make the scene a safe and loving place for people to come and be. So yes, please don't hesitate to reach out if you need help, to get help where you need it.
100%.
So, you sharing that initially, Than, I want to share just a little bit about how my mental health journey started.
Sure.
I didn't actually start with a therapist. This might be inspiration for some. I was in a really dark spot. I had been cheated on. I had done something really stupid when I was under the influence, and I had lost some friends, and I was smoking weed from morning to night. Like, I was in the most depressing, dark place I'd ever been in. And I just so happened to have gotten an audiobook for free in my Audible library that talked about setting boundaries and getting your needs met, and finding people that will give you love without having to give them something in return to get it. And this book shifted my whole perspective on life and started me on a journey. I have now read easily 50 plus self-help psychology books, and I'm now working as a licensed therapist, trying to help people the way that that the person who wrote that book helped me. There's a lot of ways you can get mental health improvements in your life. Seeing a licensed therapist is one of the best and most direct ways. But other resources available to you are finding good, healthy community that loves you, finding books, YouTube videos, articles, and you got to be careful of your sources, right? But if you have someone who is a doctor or a licensed therapist and they know what they're talking about, like, you can go and research and get some more awareness. I'll just say that if you're in a dark place, usually something's not aligned. Some wire is miscrossed somewhere, or something in your life is contributing to that. And there's ways you can get out of it. I'm telling you, so many people live in a hopeless state, and it's as though like you're missing it's like your computer's dying, but you're missing a part, or you're eating something with poison in it. You just need to like take out that poison. So I don't know if you have anything else you want to say, Than, but I've got some things I want to talk about, topics to bring up in terms of laser tag, and we're also going to talk about like not just our experiences but solutions. Like, what do you need to do to make these situations better? Because absolutely there is hope that these things can become better for you and for others in your communities.
I think we've done a decent kind of high level overview off the jump. Let's move to a little more force, or a little more game specific thing. And I'm sure that in doing that, that's going to feed into some other pieces as well.
Totally. All right, I love it. Let's talk some tag. So I've got 4 topics that I brought up and ran by Than that we're going to kind of cover. The 4 topics are going to be emotional regulation, being able to handle your emotions and keep them at a cool, calm place during games. Managing ego, handling criticism, and dealing with conflict. We'll kind of go in that order. I wanted to start with emotional regulation because I think this may come across as one of the most obvious places that mental health seems like it's important. You're playing laser tag, and during games, people may have freakouts. They may fly off the handle in anger. They may become crushed and defeated. They may give up in the middle of games. They might become passive aggressive. They might freeze up, unable to, maybe they're starting to lose their senses. Emotional regulation is an important skill for playing laser tag. Than, have you ever struggled with emotional regulation?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I've definitely had my share of blow ups in game and out of game. Kind of the biggest one that I can really remember, at least specifically at like a nationals level event, was actually in 2002 in Sugarland, where the net result of it was I basically walked out of an arena and spiked a pack into the corner of their armory. Definitely not my finest moment as far as that goes. But there were a lot of things that kind of led to that moment. As far as there were things happening in my personal life that were not great. There were things tournament wise that were not great, and it really just all kind of came to a head with me walking out of a game and just full on pack off, hard throw into a corner. I don't recommend this. If you want to continue playing at the tournament that you're at. Somehow I managed to not get kicked out of that tournament in that moment. I'm still not actually quite sure how, but I managed to not. So yes, it's a thing. But but there is kind of a flip side here where, um, you know, yes, you don't want to be, super, super high, super low, blowing up at people, and all that sort of thing. But there is something to be said for having some emotion to your play. Like, we aren't robots, and the part of the joy of competition is that you do end up in kind of a heightened state, and whether that's tag or sports or anything else competitive, like there is an element of because you are in a heightened state, because you do care about the result of what's happening. Having some emotion to your play is fine. It just you need to know kind of where the good where good upper and lower boundaries are on that, and that's that's kind of the trick is finding where your personal good upper and lower boundaries are, and how those kind of play with other people, and how that meshes up.
Yeah, there's some good points in there. One of which just validating that it's okay to have emotions. I would say that if Stan, it sounded like you were pretty invested in that game, wouldn't you say?
I was I like to think that when I'm playing at a tournament, like I'm invested in the whole tournament. Like, I don't go to competitions to not be invested and not play and not and not care about what's happening, which has made a few tournaments over the years really rough as far as that goes. But yeah, that one in 2002, I think was really kind of my all-time low as far as conduct at a tournament. Definitely not
for sure.
Not something I want to repeat.
No, it's very important that we regulate emotions. In Than's case, in that instance, and you're not the only one, but we have a responsibility to manage our emotions. That's something I do want to say, that, like, I think it's a good thing that you were passionate, that you cared. I don't think the answer to all of this is just to say, well, you shouldn't care about a stupid game so much. Like, that invalidates the root of the problem, and it's not cool to not care about things, honestly. Like I wouldn't make 300 plus videos about laser tag if I didn't have an addiction and passion for it, right? Like,
Right.
It's about finding that balance. How can you maintain your love for the game but still be responsible for your emotions, right? Some of what we're going to talk about today is we're explaining why some of these things are happening, but you still have a responsibility to change the outcome. So we could explain that you felt so strongly about that game, and that's why you ended up throwing the pack, but that doesn't make it okay. There were things that you needed to do differently. And I've certainly had my fits of rage as well. I the other week, I absolutely was out of line in yelling at a player who I needed to go downstairs and attack quicker than he was doing, because he was sitting and talking to the ref who was trying to teach him a lesson about the game. He was a newer player. I gravely regret that. So, like, I admit that I'm right there, still learning. We're all still learning and growing. But another element of this I think is important to talk about. I'll just talk about PTSD, like post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'm not saying like a strict diagnosis of it, but symptoms of it. We're simulating combat. And people can have intense emotions in this game, and that can create a cocktail of nightmares, rumination, feelings of, being a failure, feelings of fear about ever being in certain situations again in the future. And like I've taken the heavy weapons role in Loveland pretty seriously in the last few years. I've had to play that role for some tournaments, and I've taken the game so passionately and seriously to such a degree that I've actually had an intense amount of rumination and fear around playing that position, to a point where even when I'd play that position in members night random games, I would feel a sinking dread in my stomach about to play those games, standing at the starting line, feeling afraid of like what's going to happen if I do a bad job. It wasn't enough to just like tell myself it's just a game, it's just a game. Like, these things are a little harder to manage. So I wanna talk about three elements of emotional regulation, if that works. I want to go pre-game, during the game, and post-game. So pre-game, if you know that you are prone to emotional dysregulation in games of Space Marines 5, one of the first things I recommend is look at your triggers from past experiences and really like get them clear in your head and write them down. Some example, like when I say a trigger, it's like when this thing happens, that's usually when you start to dysregulate. Some common triggers are you get penalized, somebody yells at you, you are losing the game, you're physically exhausted, a certain player who you don't like is tagging you or beating you, or simply the fact that you're in the middle of a war zone. Certain game states might be a trigger for you. One of the best things you can do is recognize these triggers and specifically frame a lot of what you're doing around those triggers, because you might be fine on certain roles, you might be fine when playing against certain players. And one of the other things you can do before a game is pre-framing the game. So when I'm talking about framing, I'm talking about the way that you view the game and change it. Because it's possible, like for me in those games with the heavy, I had what I'd call a maladaptive belief about the game. A maladaptive belief is something that it's a belief you have about your situation that is unhelpful. Even if it's true, focusing on it is not going to help you obtain your goals. So, for example, a maladaptive belief I had about heavy weapons was, if I get pushed downstairs, my team's probably going to lose the game. Okay, you know what? Honestly, that thought is pretty accurate. It definitely increases my probability that I'm going to lose the game. However, I'm focused... In your
arena? Yes.
Absolutely, in my arena, the Loveland arena. However, the belief is incredibly unhelpful in order to, one, help me win the upstairs fight, and two, to stay in an emotionally regulated state, which is very important for the game. So I might use the phrases before the game. I would think in my head, it's okay if I lose. It's okay if I lose. Or, it's most important that I have fun. It's most important that I have fun. And I'm repeating it. Because when you're repeating a thought intentionally, you're not allowing space for the other thoughts to actually be present on the front of your mind. You're sort of like attaching a sticky note on top of what you normally believe so that you don't have room to focus on it. We can only focus on one thing at a time, and pre-framing a game can definitely help you enter the game in a better headspace or in a better context. Any thoughts about that, Than, before I move on?
No, I mean that definitely makes a fair amount of sense. I think I feel like that's something that I probably need to do a better job of, like on the extended members nights, because there were definitely times when I was coming out last year to play on those extended members nights, and just would get in a few minutes into a game, and I'm not playing well, and I'm just getting frustrated, because I haven't kind of set up beforehand, like, what, this is, I'm here with with friends having a good time. It's okay. Not, without kind of setting that sort of pre-framing, getting into games, which I know we'll obviously cover off a bit more here in a little bit. Just put can definitely lead to some some unpleasant headspaces in games that should be a little more relaxing as far as that goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I mean, even just you pre-framing by thinking about your friends in the lobby, thinking about your good times together eating out, it kind of pulls you out of the intensity of the arena. It's like, okay, remember, this is all in the context of me and my buddies. It's okay. It's not that big of a deal. If that's how you want to frame it, that's awesome, and that can definitely help. Even for an intense competition like Nats, where maybe I don't want to think as casually, or truthfully fun isn't my highest priority. I mean, for me personally, in the tournament, I was thinking about, for me, God, like for my religion. And me and my friends, we would all do this thing where we would do like a team song and a team chant to pull us into our friendship and get us out of our heads. So like there were like a few things, and I would do this. Finally, I would do this weird Heath Ledger like method acting thing where I'd get into this predatory killer mindset where I was like too vicious to tilt. I don't know. That's something weird I'd have to dive into another time. But I did a bunch of things to make sure I wasn't sitting there freaking out about, oh no, oh no, oh no, what if I lose? What if I lose? What if I lose? Gotta distract yourself. Now in game, you're playing laser tag. We're mainly Space Marines, but I'm starting to be more considerate of all the people out there playing like laser ball, which I think is a larger scene than us. But when you're in the game of laser tag, so what will begin to happen if you are dysregulating is something called flooding. I want you to imagine just like emotions tend to be kind of like a wave, a tidal wave. They can be small, they can be large, but in essence, they're this thing that's going to happen to you. It's going to wash over you. Now, I want you to think of the front and back of your head. The front of your head is what we would call the prefrontal cortex. That part of your brain is responsible for thinking, morality, start-stop functions like maybe I shouldn't do this, or maybe that's not a good idea. When you are being flooded with negative emotion based on your triggers, which we thought of earlier, for your prefrontal cortex is going to literally shut off and cease to function. The activity is going to go way down. So maybe you get penalized. You feel a flood of anger. You are no longer thinking clearly. I want to just put that in context. The part of your brain that takes over, if you touch the back of your head where the spine meets the brain, is we'll call it the lizard brain. It is your primitive mind, and it is responsible for fight, flight, freeze response and survival mechanisms. So just in this example of the penalty, I want you to imagine that when this person gets penalized, they are literally going to turn into an animal, the way they think. They're no longer thinking clearly and logically. They're thinking with either fight, I want to attack the person who did this to me. I want to flight, they're going to run away from the situation, or they're going to freeze. They might get completely shut down. And when this happens in the middle of a game, to be honest, it's going to be really difficult if you're in the middle of a laser tag game to get re-regulated. That's why I think the pre-framing is so important. The pre-game recognizing triggers and trying to avoid them is so important. But here's what I got for you in the middle of a game. Breathe. Breathing is literally going to be your number one tool to re-regulate. Like, I mean slow breaths. When you're getting dysregulated and flooded, your heart rate's going to pick up drastically, and you're becoming more angry, essentially. If you can slowly breathe, even if it's bad for your few seconds of gameplay, it might be better for the long term. You will begin to re-regulate yourself, but it's going to be hard, and it'll probably take a few seconds. Maybe you can do a quick breath, and keep going. If that works for you, you're going to have to play around. Additionally, I would say that people using their senses can be very helpful to ground yourself. If you can touch a wall or touch your phaser, or even just touch the sweat on your forehead or something, like something to bring you out of your head into the world, that can be helpful as well. Because when you're going into that lizard brain mode, you're definitely starting to distance from reality. And the last thing I would say is remembering a truth, quote unquote, can be helpful as well. It's kind of the exact same things you would use for pre-framing the game. It's just a game. It's okay to lose. I can recover from this might be a good one. Having something that you prepared before the game that you say to yourself or write on your arm or whatever it takes to remember it, just to remember that one sentence, again, sticky note right on top of all those other thoughts you're having. Instead of, I can't believe you just penalized me. That's so stupid. I'm not a cheater. I'm going to get him back. Okay, it's just a game. It's just a game. It's just a game. Even if you have to keep saying it to yourself over and over and over and over and over again, say it out loud. It's just a game. 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 Until you kind of get back to some slightly regulated version of yourself. It's okay. Remember, you are essentially an animal. You got that lizard brain for a reason. It's there to help you if, the volcano blows up and you got to run for your life. In a game of laser tag, you might go into that mode. You got to get yourself back to a calm state. Thoughts on that, Dan?
So, I mean, I think everybody who's played at a tournament level has had that moment of getting pinged by a ref with a ref suit and getting that that act of the penalty and the looking down and being very confused momentarily, because in all of our heads, there's no one in the scene who thinks that they're actively trying to cheat. And I guess that's just not it's just not who and what we are as a scene, which is great. Like everybody's generally trying to play to the spirit of the game, and so getting that negative act of, oh, I've just been considered a cheater. Yeah, there is that moment of, are you fucking kidding me? Really? But yeah, there is a moment where, if you can just take a quick breath, and what helps me with that is the taking of a quick breath, along with knowing that I've been on the other end of that. I've been the one handing out the penalties, and knowing that, okay, they saw something, whoever handed this penalty out, they saw something that I obviously didn't see, because obviously if I had seen it, I wouldn't have done it and I wouldn't have gotten pinged for it. And trying to kind of keep that as a more present thought in that moment, that somebody else in that moment has more complete information than you do. Now, I'm not going to say that keeping that thought in my head was a quick process. As far as that goes, it's definitely something like that. Since the ref suits have been introduced, that's definitely been kind of an evolutionary process of my own head, as far as that goes. Because I know that the first couple times I got pinged with a ref suit, I was definitely a little tilted, because I don't cheat. That's not what I do. Well, it's not that It's not that the ref thinks you're intentionally cheating. The ref just saw something that you didn't see. You know, maybe you just missed somebody's trail. It's an inadvertent chase. You know, you thought you cleared a corner and you weren't shielding. No, you actually did shield. You didn't quite clear the corner as well as you thought you did. You know, I know that we all think we're perfect coming around corners. Newsflash, we are not all perfect coming around corners 100% of the time. I realize that that's shocking and revelatory information to, you know, some of our audience, that they're not perfect coming around corners 100% of the time. But, you know, that's one of those things we just have to accept. So, yeah, if you can hold certain things like that in your head, specifically around penalties. So, yeah, penalties aren't personal. They're just, you just didn't see something, or somebody else saw something that you didn't. Take a breath, take a beat, and move on with your next game state. And again, I realize that is sometimes a lot easier said than done, especially if you're in a high intensity moment, and you know, maybe that penalty, you know, combo breaks your attack. Maybe you had just broken the enemy resupply and you got in and you were just about to absolutely smack the holy hell out of their entire team. But you chase somebody on the way in. Sorry, you just got pinged. Like, I understand in that moment, like, you're riding a high because you think you just did something amazing, and then you get immediately crashed down because of something that maybe you weren't aware of, or maybe it was a bad call. I mean, that those happen too. Refs are human. Bad calls happen. And so, and you know, trying to keep all that in your head in that kind of in that emotional roller coaster, it can be rough. It can be a challenge. But I feel like if you are able to kind of hold that thought in your head in that moment, it's going to lead to a better, you know, net end state. You know, rest of game / post game, because if you let those moments take you completely out of your game, well, now you're potentially on a downward spiral for the rest of the game, and that can negatively impact your team's chances to win if you can't kind of bring your headspace back to, okay, yep, I need to do my job in this game. If you're so focused on, oh, you know, this ref made a bad call, or what I perceived as a bad call, and I'm so focused on that now I'm not thinking of anything else within the game, and now I'm just getting torn to shreds because my focus isn't where it should be. You know, potentially you cost your team games that way.
Yeah, there's so much good stuff in there. Something that you did really well is, like, it took you some time, but you changed your framing around the game, where I think many people would they come into the sport thinking, okay, there's refs. If I cheat, I'll get penalized. That's not actually true. That's the concept. But in reality, you can get penalized without actually cheating. Happens all the time. At the same time, other players can cheat and they may not get penalized. Again, we don't want either of these things to be true. We try to avoid them, but they are true. It happens all the time. But I think where people can get really upset is when they believe that the game is played, or there are certain givens, there are certain realities of tag that aren't true, but they believe them to be true. It would be kind of like if I played you in chess, Stan, but I told you all the rules except that queens can move any direction you want. I just told you they were like a rook. And then I checkmate you because I moved diagonally with the queen. It's like, well, that was always part of the game, but some of these things you either find out over time or you don't get told right off the bat. So it took me some time to accept it, but like now when I play tag, if I'm going to chase a player, I try to really box up and I call out my steps out loud to increase the probability that the ref sees me as not cheating. Now, I'm not cheating on purpose. I'm not trying to go 10 feet and tell him I'm going 9. It's really the ref's call. But I'm aware that even if I do not cheat, like I guarantee do not cheat, I could still get penalized. And I can't get mad at it because there's no point. It actually just hurts my game to get mad at either getting penalized or other things like, I can't tell you how many times I have thought, oh, I should have won that match, or I should have won that trade. Like, how on earth could that have happened to me? That should is a maladaptive belief. That's not true. There was never a guarantee that I'll win anything. There's no guarantee that just because I'm a 3-hit doesn't mean I can walk up to a 1-hit and I guarantee get to tag them down without them tagging me. I've been juked by Strikva a couple times where he does like above the wall to the side above the wall again, and I just got downed by a 1-hit when I was staring at them.
I mean, Strikva's pretty ridiculous with that stuff. So
absolutely,
it's hard to be mad at it.
So this pre-framing doesn't just go before games; it's as you're learning. Keep adjusting yourself to reality and being willing to live in reality. Because when we get outside of reality and then something breaks that reality, that's something that can definitely dysregulate you. It feels like people are cheating when they're not, or that life is against you when it's not. Or maybe it is, but maybe that's just part of life. Like maybe sometimes life is against you and you got to accept that. Some games you just can't win, and that's okay.
Sometimes life just isn't fair. That is true. Sometimes laser tag is not fair. That is also true.
That's right. And the big thing with it is it's just not helpful. It's not helpful to dysregulate. It doesn't help anything. And I want to talk about anger for a second here. And Than, if I could be honest, this may turn into a 2-parter because I feel like we got so much to talk about here that maybe we continue down the road or we take a pause. So anger gets a bit of a bad reputation. Anger, a couple things about it. One, the function of anger is to rile you up to right wrongs in the world. To defend people that are being attacked, to defend yourself when your honor is being challenged, to get you in a fighting stance. That's the point of anger. An appropriate use of anger is if you're walking on the street and someone tries to mug you, you begin to feel really angry and your body gets riled up into a fighting stance and you're able to fight them off. Or someone is trying to con you out of your money and you call them out on it, you become angry to, make something happen. Anger is a powerful emotion. It gives you power and it can be intoxicating. That being said, anger, for that very reason, is often highly destructive. In fact, this is a great lesson that is taught in Avatar: The Last Airbender, which I take a lot of metaphors out of it. Have you seen that, Than?
So that is one of those shows that has been recommended to me so many times by so many people, and I still have not watched it. And I know I need to. Like, I have heard nothing but good things.
Yeah.
On so many levels, but I just haven't yet. There's too much content and not enough time.
I hear you. It's okay. It's really your loss. I think you'll like it. But let me I've been told that. I need to finish the metaphor here. So, I mean, the elements, they all symbolize different traits of different peoples and cultures. And so fire is the element of power. Fire, there are 2 ways to utilize your fire bending in the show. Most firebenders utilize anger to channel their fire. Fire is a great metaphor for anger because it can get stuff done, but it can easily become something that hurts your loved ones, or you can go too far with it, just like fire. But the healthiest way to utilize anger is out of a place of love and passion. And they learn that later in the show. They find the original ancient form of firebending. Anyway, utilizing anger is a dangerous game, sometimes it's the right thing to do. Standing up to a bully is a great place to be angry. But also, anger can be a secondary emotion. It's often a cover up emotion for something else. You might feel indignant, you might feel jealous or hurt or
Afraid.
Afraid. Any number of things, and that can manifest as anger, like a shield to protect you. So that's why we're talking about anger. You might feel hurt that someone thought you cheated, or you might feel afraid that you're letting your team down, and you become angry as a result. It's not something that you're choosing to do on purpose. It's your body's natural response trying to solve the situation for you. You think about, babies. How do babies get their needs met? They're hungry, they need a nap, they want attention. They get all dysregulated and they start crying and yelling. And then we know to give them attention. That doesn't mean it's okay. We learn as adults this cool thing called delayed gratification and speaking words, like we can get our own needs met as adults, but your body's kind of wired this way. You're going to get angry. So that's why the breathing, remembering the truth in the moment is important. Pre-framing is important. I also want to talk about post-game. So after, go ahead.
But just kind of going back to the just the displaying of anger, really bringing it back to something that it's said, way closer to the beginning of this show, that for a lot of years, our sport is a male dominated sport. We do have a pretty decent amount of female players now, and that's fucking great.
Mm-hmm.
But by and large, historically, our tournament scene has been predominantly male. And going back to, as males, what's historically been the one acceptable emotion for guys to show in public? Anger.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so you can look at a lot of historical conflict in the Force tournament scene, going all the way back to the mid late 90s in Australia and rolling all the way forward to now, because of the predominantly male nature of the scene. The predominant emotion that has come to the forefront is anger, because it's the socially acceptable thing for men to express, or has historically been the socially acceptable thing for men to express. Which again leads to its own set of issues, conflicts, challenges, which obviously we're trying to kind of work through with this podcast and say, hey, there's some other ways that we can express and resolve things.
Absolutely. That is an incredible point, because just like it's okay to show anger, it's not okay to show sadness or hurt or really that vulnerability, because that looks weak. That's where that comes from. This cultural stereotype or expectation that you need to be strong enough to handle anything. It's okay if you're angry, you look like you're handling things, you look strong, but really you can't control yourself. And the answer to the anger is asking yourself, why am I angry? Well, actually, I'm feeling really hurt or betrayed or disappointed. And what do you do about that? Well, getting angry is not going to help that, Yeah,
and again, I mean, it's the making it okay in our little corner of the internet and reality, for everybody to be able to express the full range of the emotional experience that we have as human beings. And it's a pond ripple effect. You throw a stone into a pond, you get ripples. And we're throwing these stones into the pond of our scene, and we're getting the ripples out that, hey, it's okay to be able to express things other than just anger. You can express the actual sadness, the actual happiness, the actual everything as far as that goes. And the idea and the hope is that, as our scene and our people from our scene end up in other places, they carry that ripple with them, and making it okay in other places where they exist, to show the full range of emotions as well. So it's ripples on ripples, and you hope that by making this spot I hate this phrase, but I guess it's appropriate, a safe space to be able to show the full range of emotions. It's like, oh, we can do that here, and you just start gradually widening the amount of places where you can do that. And you hope that kind of the net end state on that is that you do get kind of more well-rounded human beings as far as that goes. I mean, this is still something that I struggle with, in terms of like showing a wider range of emotions in a wider range of situations. I'm not good at it. I'm working on it, but I'm not good at it. But knowing that I can show a little more emotional range within the context of the scene, as it were, it's helpful. So, and hopefully we can keep making it safe for other people to do that as well, so we can all be a little more emotionally healthy.
So what are the benefits then of getting to express your other emotions here in the scene?
It's just it's one of those things that is kind of hard for me to articulate, but I'll try. I know.
Please, for the kids, for the audience.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the knowing that these other emotions, really any emotion, is okay to express. I mean, obviously within bounds. I mean, again, like your comment about anger being destructive. It's okay to show a certain amount of anger at certain times, because it is a valid emotion, but not to an extent that it's destroying somebody else. Like that's obviously out of bounds. But it's okay to be annoyed in a moment about, I missed that shot, I should have made that shot. Okay, well, moving on. But it's also okay to get done with the game, and and I'm going to take 2008 Nats as an example. When we got done with the fourth game of that grand final, and we had won, and Auckland won that Nats over Oakley, and it was a great grand final set, and I have this very clear memory of walking out of that game and just collapsing against a wall and just crying, because the emotional drop and release was just huge. Knowing that it's okay and acceptable to actively display those types of emotions in context, because if you can display them in one place, well, you can display them someplace else. Like if you can be, if you can, be, happy and sad and vulnerable and everything else within the context and confines of, of this one activity and group of people, then it's like I feel like it gives you a certain amount of like permission to like, oh wait, this is okay, this is acceptable. I can, be a more complete human being in other contexts. And obviously, context is everything with where and when you're displaying emotions. Like, I'm not going to, be at work on a conference call and start bawling my eyes out for something like that's not the time or place for that. But there is time and place for every emotion within the human range, and there's time and place to be able to experience that and to not be so locked into, oh, the only thing I can express is anger, or I can't, express or feel anything. I think that's the one of the biggest traps that we fall into sometimes, is that we think, oh, I can only either express anger or nothing. And that definitely also leads to its own set of issues and challenges. And so knowing that I have a place where I can express a little more than anger and nothing has given me license to be able to try to experience that in other places as well.
I love the beautifully organic way this conversation has gone. Just the rabbit holes we're going down. We're definitely going to need to do multiple parts on this. You're experiencing acceptance. There are so many people who they're not congruent. The way that they exist on the inside, they don't show it on the outside, either to nobody or they only show it to a few select people. And when you aren't being congruent with yourself, any connection you make, you're not really receiving the love from those people, because they're loving a fake version of yourself, not the real you. Vulnerability is, you can survive without it, you can live. And to keep speaking to the men, like this is that stereotype. Like, you need to be strong always. You cannot show weakness. You can't show sadness. You can't be afraid. You need to have it all together.
All the time.
And when you show people...
all together, all the time.
Yeah. You can't do it. You're not... You're just a person. It's one of the givens of life that you don't know you don't know how to do everything.
Yeah, and this is and this is one of the things that that I'm still working on. Like, I fully acknowledge that I'm not always, to use your word, congruent inside to outside, depending upon the various situations and scenarios that I may be in. But it's nice that at least I've got one place that I relatively can be. Mm-hmm. So yeah, again, I said at the top, I'm fully aware that I'm not a finished article when it comes to mental health journey and getting everything sorted.
Of course.
And I think that's important to kind of reiterate as we go through. Mm-hmm. That again, it is a process, and it's not linear. Progress with any mental health stuff, whether it's specific to Laserforce or in your wider life, it's not linear.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have 3 steps forward, 2.5 steps back, half step forward, quarter step back, 6 steps forward, 2 steps back, 8 steps back, 4 steps forward. Like it's and that's okay. Like that's a kind of a normal expected thing. It's not like you wake up one day and everything is suddenly perfect. It's not how that goes. The point is that you keep making the active efforts to try to improve your mental health and your mental states. But it's okay if you have those backslidey days or those backslidey games. Like if you've been completely calm about getting penalties for an entire tournament, maybe you've picked up 3 or 4 just because, and you've been calm, and then you get that 5th one, and you have a little bit of a rant about it in the moment. That's okay. Like again, it's not linear progress. The fact that in that moment you can look, you'll be able to look back later and go, well, okay, so I picked up 5 penalties this tournament, and 4 times when I got penalized, I was perfectly calm, but I had one time where I kind of lost it a little bit. Oh, but the tournament before, I had picked up 3 penalties, and all 3 times I got mad. That's still progress.
Mm-hmm.
Fine.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's what I was saying at the top about like the acceptance. Like, well, yeah, anyone in therapy is messed up, or anybody at all is messed up. Like, we are so flawed. But honestly, that is such a beautiful thing when you can come to accept it. That you're gonna, in terms of laser tag, you're gonna lose games, you're gonna have bad trays, you're gonna make bad calls, you're gonna get beat by players that you perceive are worse than you, but they're definitely not now, and all these kind of things. But I find that people change the way they play based on their own attitudes about themselves in their life as they come to learn and grow. And so on one hand, like, yeah, have grace for yourself, be willing to accept where you're at right now and know that you can get better and it isn't linear. And this acceptance piece is really beautiful. Just that, there's a lot of ways I would start with someone wanting to learn how to accept themselves, but one of the best ways you can do it is be around people who accept you. For you to come out of that game, Than, and to cry openly, to show that part of yourself, how were you met? How did people respond to you? And what was that like?
I mean, it's been a while, obviously, but no, it was just a general slump against the wall, and that was a moment where people were just excited that we had won, and even the Oakley boys, even though they were sad that we had beaten them, like they were excited for us as well. Grace in defeat, as it were, which is
Right.
something I occasionally struggle with. And so yeah, that was definitely a people were pretty accepting of it in that moment, which was pretty cool. But I think that was kind of a global across the team at that moment, that all of us just kind of had that emotional drop after that game because everything was so heightened. So
this is part of
the that's 17 years ago now. Oh my god.
It still sticks with you though. Funny how like you called that moment out today, 17 years later.
16 and a half. It's not quite 17. It won't be 17 until we go to Brisbane
I see.
In
only
August.
16 and a half. Yeah.
Oh yeah, only 16 and a half. It can that memory can legally drive.
So we talk about this a little bit when Guy Next Door came on, and we talked about building a member base, how the
Yep.
relationships are one of the most important things in keeping people coming back. And I'll I'll, I'll stand here and say it's essentially factual that relationships are one of the most important things that any human being needs to live a happy and fulfilled life. You don't need to
Yeah.
have 100 friends. You need to have like a few good friends. You need to have some people that really love you for you, that you can be vulnerable with. I mean, there's literally a higher rate of physical illness, mental illness, and a shorter life expectancy for people who are lonely. And it's okay if you're in that spot. There are lots of people who are lonely, and I've certainly been very lonely in my life. But I'm very, very blessed now that I have found some people who are safe, because I learned how to like tell if a person is just loving you for what you provide them versus do they actually care about me on my good and bad days. And that's something you can learn if you're in that spot. There are whole books written about it and people who talk about it. And I would say that one of the greatest strengths of the Laser Force community is that we're a very accepting group. That all these expectations that are put on each of us outside of the Laser Force scene, a lot of them go right out the window, and you're embraced just as another nerd who loves laser tag, someone who's here to play and compete. Now you do have expectations. You can't be toxic to people. We have rules and boundaries that help people feel safe. We have expectations, and that's okay. That those expectations are done out of love. They're done to protect and cultivate a good community, not to harm others.
Yeah, we've certainly gone through some iterations of the community over the years that were definitely more toxic and not super mental health friendly, as it were. But I feel like some of that looking back on it is very hindsight 2020 with the current perspective of
Mm-hmm.
things. Because the community as it was in the past was very much a product of society in the moment. Um,
Mm.
Now, am I happy that society has evolved to a certain extent, and and it's kind of given us this opportunity to redo the scene for the better? Absolutely. Like, let's be very clear about that. I'm much happier, being able to look at where the scene is now versus where it was, and be like, yeah, okay, it's definitely a lot more accepting. It's definitely a again an overall safer place for a wider variety of people. Um, but there is something to trying to remember that when we're looking back at a certain amount of the historical toxicity, that historical toxicity was a reflection of society at large at the time as well. So I feel like it's just one of those things we sometimes have to keep in mind when we're doing look backs on things.
Of course, I would say it's appropriate to have that same grace and compassion, looking back, knowing that it does, explanations aren't. Um, Sorry, what did I say earlier? Just because we're explaining it doesn't mean that we accept it. It's still our
Yeah.
responsibility for all of us to be, cultivating a good environment for people. And even today, we're not perfect. We definitely have things we need to work on. Um,
100%.
but the classic expression that is often used is "hurt people hurt people." And it's not that I think people, 20 years ago were evil, or that people today are evil where there is harm. I think be, well, I like to put it this way. Any well-written movie has a villain who thinks they're the good guy.
Correct.
You know, no one, you see that in kids shows sometimes where it's like, ooh, I'm evil, I'm going to blow up the world. It's like, no one actually thinks that way except for psychopaths sometimes. But like, and those are very rare. The vast majority of the time, anybody who has ever yelled, tilted, thrown a pack, or been a bad teammate, or a chair, or whatever it is, there's a reason for it. If you have compassion and you ask them why, their story will usually explain the situation. Now, they're still responsible for their actions. I've been responsible for every single time I've been toxic to somebody, yelled at a teammate, flipped out over a lost game. You know, that's not an excuse, but remember, we're not perfect. And you really can't be. You're going to flip out at some point. Or maybe if you don't flip out, like, it's just to say you have flaws. Everyone's got flaws. And it's not helpful to compare yourself to other people. It's best to compare yourself to who you were yesterday. Can you get 1% better going forward? Kind of back to Than's example of, well, if you flipped out the last 3 penalties and then finally got one where you were able to manage it, like, give yourself a freaking pat on the back. That's amazing. You're growing. You're moving in the right direction. Beating yourself up isn't going to help you get better, and it's not going to help you love other people better. It's okay to be where you're at. It's okay to accept yourself where you're at and try to move in the direction you want to go. We have enough criticism in this world. We have enough people putting expectations on us. That's why people come here, I think. We're all looking to escape somewhat. We get to put on these packs and go be space soldiers, and then go get drinks and eat junk food with our buddies. It's great. So that's what keeps people coming back.
Have multi-hour conversations after a members night because you got to break down what happened in every single game that happened that night.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing.
Yeah, I miss those post members night Denny's runs where it'd be like we'd get done with members night, somewhere between 9:30 and 10, and then you go to Denny's, and the next thing you know, it's like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, and it's like, oh, well, work is going to suck in the morning, but whatever.
Hey, anytime you ever want to come out for one of our members' nights, we're doing that with In-N-Out and Fat Shack right now.
Noted.
Yeah. So we'll probably wrap up on this one, just covering emotional regulation tonight. But yeah. I kind of want to circle back a little bit as we're wrapping up. Just, you kind of talked about, expectations, that it's not okay to be angry you can only be angry if you're a guy. And that's kind of societal expectations. Something else I just want to give credit to is that we also live in a society where it's okay for women to be sad, but it's not okay for them to be angry. Women are often severely punished and judged, or called slanderous names if they express any form of anger, discontentment, if they're not agreeable to what other people are asking of them or telling them. And I certainly hope that the Laserforce community can be just as accommodating as they've been to the men. Like, it's okay to be angry, as we've said with all of this. This just needs to be a place where we're not judging people based on those kind of factors.
As tag players, like, we all deserve to be able to express the full range of emotions and not be fully pigeonholed back into these societal boxes of this is what's acceptable for you to express, and this is what's acceptable for you to express. Like, yeah, we need to make sure that we're giving the proper grace for everyone as far as that goes. 100% for sure.
So I want to wrap up here with post game. It's kind of like, hey listener, we're going to circle way back to when we were talking about emotional regulation pre-game, in-game. So there's things you can do, and just to be honest, all that we've been talking about I think is very relevant to emotional regulation. we look back at the pregame, to be honest with you, like people who are living happy, contented lives outside of laser tag tend to be the people who do the best with their emotional regulation in game. Someone who can objectively think like, well, if I lose this game, it's like I can be upset. It's not that big of a deal. Ultimately, I'm doing okay. I have my supports. I'm getting exercise and sleeping well, and I'm eating well, and I feel good about myself, and I got loved ones. Like those tend to be good supports for your emotional regulation.
Yeah.
But in the event that you do dysregulate during a game, having that grace for yourself, my recommendations for post game is 1, take a timeout. This is actually a technique I got from John Gottman, 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. Couples argue a lot and they can really hurt each other easily. One of the best things you can do when you are dysregulated and flooded is to walk away. Take at least 20 minutes is what he recommends, but for us there's often a nice 15-minute window between games. So I'm telling my players right now, take 10. If you're angry, if you're bickering with each other and arguing, I want you to take 10 and you can continue this conversation when you come back. Because if you walk away, you breathe, you re-regulate yourself, when you come back to talk, your prefrontal cortex should be engaged again. We should be in a better place to actually talk. When you're flooded, no productive conversations are going to happen. So just walk away.
Yeah, that's my post game, re-regulation. If I've had a bad game, like and I'm in my head about stuff, has always been, I'm just gonna walk outside for a few minutes, breathe, get away from people, reset a little bit, and then come back. And I think that I feel like that's a pretty a pretty standard post game calming method that a lot of us use. If we know that we're a little spiky after a game for whatever reason, take 5-10 minutes, walk away from people, breathe, come back, have a calm or a calmer discussion as to whatever went wrong in game, or just a sorry, I screwed up X, Y, and Z. I know what we did, or I know what I did wrong. We're good. Yeah, that's definitely my post game fix for that, as it were.
Yeah, it's thankfully it tends to be part of most laser tag cultures where people go out and take a walk around the building when they gotta. Something else I'd say is ask yourself why you got dysregulated and do something about it. And it's very important to recognize what you control and what you don't control when thinking about this. Because sometimes there are elements of the game that you can't control. You can't control if your heavy dies out early. You can't control the other team beating up your teammate and getting 3 goals in a row, or whatever it might be. But what can you control? The reality is that when you take control and ownership, you begin to feel like you have done something about it. You feel less helpless. You feel less like a victim. And you don't feel as much like you need to resort to anger. You can resort to something that's actually effective. And, honestly, sometimes the only thing you can do is accept something. Like, oh, well, that was a wash. That game was bad. I'm going to choose to accept it and not beat myself up for it. I'm not going to go berate the player for making a mistake. That's not always called for. In certain tournaments, maybe you do need to give some feedback, but that's okay. And above all, I would recommend people repair the relationships if there has been any damage caused during the dysregulation.
Yeah, having a calm discussion with someone if you've had an in-game blow up with them is massively important. And sometimes that calm discussion isn't necessarily going to happen immediately after a game, because you may both still be kind of escalated as far as that goes. But making the effort to have that calmer discussion and try to get back onto the same page, or if not onto the same page, at least maybe into the same chapter or in the same book. Sometimes getting back onto the same page immediately after a game when you've had a blow up at somebody can be a little excessively challenging. But acknowledging, to that person, yeah, okay, we need to discuss this later when we're both not quite so elevated and escalated, is important when those things have happened, for sure.
Definitely. It's okay to admit that you said something out of turn. It's okay to have been wrong about something you said in the heat of the moment and to admit it. And people often feel like, I need to have been right about whatever I said. And if you like think about it too hard, you're like, oh, maybe I was wrong about that, I'm just not going to say anything. You might be afraid, like, oh, they're going to think I'm incompetent if I admit I was wrong. No, that is the exact opposite. I guarantee you. The other week, I was playing Members Night, and me and Brahmatized were Resupply. We got flushed and split up in different directions, and I was very confident in the moment that the way I went was the way we both should have gone, and he was very confident the way he went was the way he should have gone. And we had a little bicker after the game, just in the heat of the moment, both like, well, here's why I went this way, and I called for you to come this way, and blah, 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 blah. Just a couple of flooded lizard brain individuals who were going to go nowhere. After we both walked away and came back later, I told them, like, to be honest, I see your point. I felt I was right in the moment. However, I can see how from your perspective, you were right. And honestly, the best thing would have been if one of us just were humble and followed the other, but we were both being a little prideful. And he was like, yeah, I feel the exact same. Me being willing to admit that I was stupid helped him admit that he was also acting stupid. And it made it just okay, because neither of us were like trying to feel like we had to be prideful about it. So it's a very healing thing, and I think we developed more respect for the other since we were able to at least admit we were wrong.
Yeah.
A captain who never admits he's wrong and always explains why he's right, you begin to doubt his competency pretty quickly.
Yeah. No one is right 100% of the time. Not even me, even though I try to, pretend I am.
You're just 99.
Yeah, 99.99. It's fine. But no, that's it. That I think for me, like over the years was one of the hardest things to learn and put into practice, but I think has been one of the best things in terms of being able to admit to people when I've gotten it wrong, and now some of that obviously comes from feeling safe in the environment and safe around people and this, that, and the other. But yeah, you'll be amazed how generally well people will respond if you're able to put your hand up and go, yep, this particular call that I made or this particular thing I did, it wasn't it wasn't cool, it wasn't right, it wasn't what I should have done, insert sentence here. And yeah, people are pretty accepting of that. Now, is it is kind of the flip side of that of if you do that somewhere where you aren't safe, and it's immediately thrown back in your face of yes, you shouldn't have done that, and people respond with anger to you being vulnerable like that. That is its own set of challenges and not greatness, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
And so the kind of the flip side of this within the community is, if someone is coming to you saying, oh yeah, no, I got X, Y, and Z wrong, I'm sorry, responding to them with with some form of anger is probably going to be very destructive in the moment for that person, being willing / able to admit that they may not have been right going forward. So, applies to tag, applies to the wider world. If someone comes to you saying that, that they can acknowledge that they got something wrong, like, doesn't, in the wider scope of things, doesn't necessarily mean you have to forgive them if it's something major. Like, you don't have to forgive people for them doing something wrong to you, but acknowledging to them that they've acknowledged that they've done something wrong is a powerful thing. Again, doesn't mean you have to forgive them. Going out into the wider meta space of, if it is something major, you don't have to forgive them, but acknowledging it is a positive thing. And then specifically to tag, it's generally better if you accept the apology in that moment if it's specific to a tag game. There's pretty much nothing within a tag game that is so major that you probably shouldn't acknowledge and forgive what's happened.
Man, I gotta go soon, but we gotta wrap this up soon. But I think it's just important. Forgiveness is powerful, and it's not just for the other person. When you forgive somebody, you let go of the anger and you allow healing to happen for yourself. Even forgiving yourself when you make a mistake probably greatly decreases your chances of losing yourself in the future. Holding on to that and beating yourself up constantly is not a way towards healing. But that's very difficult. We're all our own worst critics. And to Than's point, you don't have to forgive someone. You always have the option to forgive someone but not forget. You don't have to trust them fully just because they apologize for something. You don't have to keep tolerating any disrespectful or untrustworthy or abusive or manipulative behaviors. This is all part of that learning how to find safe people, who to let into that circle. It takes time and practice, and you got to know what you're looking for. But yes, forgiveness can be very powerful and healing for both you and the other person.
For sure.
All right. I'm sorry. I got to get going here.
I was about to say we covered like one of the three things that you wanted to cover. So or four, yeah. So yeah, we'll definitely have to do a part 2 for this at a later time for sure.
Sounds good. I really appreciate you coming on, Than. Thanks for your wisdom.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye, everyone. Take care of yourselves. Thanks for listening. Hope to see you around.